Can I tell you, it is a lot easier to preach than to read accompanying handbells. That was hard. I have such great appreciation for our handbell choir. And I have admiration, reverence for the Nauset Ringers director, Tom Dutton, because he can bring out a sound like no one else. Tom, thank you. Yes, I was terrified, but thank you. It was wonderful. So, we just heard Psalm 24, and I think I had a transfiguration. I think I witnessed a transfiguration, and I wonder if you did as well. The coming together of the bells and the chimes and those grand chords, the fortissimos and the pianissimos, do I pronounce them properly? I hope I do. And the way that the music accompanied the words, it transfigured the psalm. Because something different happened, and so I hope you, just as I did, heard the words differently. There was, to extend the musical metaphor, a different tenor to the psalm. For me, and I hope for you, it was almost a mystical experience in which a question kept on coming forth. And I hope you heard that question in a new way or more profoundly. What is the question? Who is this King of glory? Who is this King of glory? Now, we must remember that this psalm could be nearly as old as 3,000 years. And back 3,000 years ago, there was not such attention to inclusive language. So today, we might say, who is the sovereign of glory? Or the ruler of glory, so that we don't have language that suggests one gender or another, or language that may be hierarchical and suggest oppression. But for the sake of ease, is it okay if we just use the language of the NRSV and that we heard today in the Psalm? Okay? Who is this King of glory? In Hebrew, Melech HaKavod, King of glory. It was a transfiguration. So speaking of the transfiguration, we heard a fascinating story from the Gospel of Mark today that Jan read to us so beautifully. And I have to say, it is one of my favorite readings because of its strangeness, because of its mystical nature. Here's the thing about the story of Jesus' transfiguration. It's not meant to be explained, so why a sermon, of course. I don't even think it's meant to be fully understood. It's simply meant to be experienced, the way that we experienced the handbell version of Psalm 24. It's a mystery. And here's the problem for us humans. When we hear the word mystery, we think it's something to be solved, like a British mystery. Okay? The story of the Transfiguration wasn't written by Agatha Christie or P.D. James or any of the mystery writers where there is a solution to something. There really is no resolution in this story beyond just noting that something mysterious happened that touched the disciples so deeply that, first of all, they were terrified and almost beyond words. As Tony Robinson said in a recent UCC devotional, they were so terrified they started to bumble their words and said the most absurd things in the face of a transfigured Jesus. They failed to use their imaginations. You see, the story of the Transfiguration invites us to use our imaginations. Can I say the one thing I think that the church needs more and more and more of is imagination. Calling upon that amazing gift that God gave to us. Hear these words from Mary Oliver. Imagination is better than a sharp instrument. To pay attention, that is our endless and proper work. Whoever you are, the world offers itself to your imagination. This is a story that invites your imagination. What could have happened on that mountaintop? Something in your imagination can create a scene that perhaps none of us could even think of, could open it up in amazing ways. Because this is a pivotal story. This story comes at the center of each of those Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So whatever happened changed the disciples in such a way that they continued to follow Jesus with greater insight, greater knowledge, greater passion. Actually, I think what happened is this. In my imagination, the question was asked to them, who is this King of glory? And they pondered that question on the mountaintop, and they changed. So you say, well, okay, I'll put my imagination to work, but truly, Transfiguration? No way, this is 2018. We don't have transfigurations these days. Oh, we just had one. But there was one. I wonder if you saw it. It was a few weeks ago. Yes, even here on Cape Cod. It was on January 31st, 2018. It was the day of the super blue blood moon. Remember that? Now, it was a super moon because the moon was closer to the earth than usual. It was a blue moon because it was the second full moon of the month. It was a blood moon because it had a little bit of a reddish tinge to it because it was also a lunar eclipse. Now, we didn't get the full lunar eclipse here, but we still had a little bit of that reddish tinge. So we had here on Cape Cod a super blue blood moon. Say that quickly several times. So it was slightly after dusk, and I went down to Nauset Beach. I thought, let's see if this really is up to snuff, all the hype, because you know there's a lot of hype around moons these days. So I wanted to see if it would really measure up. Well, I went down to the beach. The parking lot is filled with cars. And there are people standing on the dunes and in the gazebo. They have their telescopes out. They have their cameras out. They have their dogs at their side. And they are just standing there in utter amazement. And what's interesting is there wasn't a lot of talking, just a lot of, yes, nodding to each other, that we were in the presence of something so spectacular. The moon had been transfigured, and we were in awe. This huge moon, it was hanging over the ocean, and it was huge and bright. It looked like the sun. Now, tell me, if you see the moon looking like the sun, isn't that a mystery that we really can't explain, but speaks about the glory of God? And then it was reflected in the water, and amazingly on the sand, because the sand was wet, and it looked like one continuous moon, because on the sand you saw a big round ball that was just as bright, or nearly as so, as the moon that was in the sky. It was amazing, and you couldn't even tell really the difference between dark sky and water, sea, and the sand. It just all flowed. It was like a transfiguration. It was a gift that none of us had to pay for. There were no tickets we had to purchase. Anybody could go. And there was no distinction between any one person. We were there regardless of who we were or where we came from. We were just one human family beholding this freely given sight. And in the presence of that moon, I thought, my goodness, awe. How could I not do all in my power to love this earth and these beautiful moments that God gives to us? It's as though I was in the presence there, and I could have been asking, who is this King of Glory? Well, I know who the King of Glory is. It's God. And the capacity to just behold God with a sense of awe. Who is this King of Glory? Well, there are two responses. And the first is just that, awe. The grace of just experiencing God in those unexpected moments of splendor. When we see in nature or in the face of someone else, a light and a beauty that we could never have imagined before. Who is this King of Glory? That is the question, I believe, when we think of Jesus on the mountaintop, that we are asked to ponder for our lives and for the church. Who is this King of Glory? Awe, grace. But there's another way we're invited to answer the question as well. And those words were in the psalm, because the psalm says, who is this King of Glory? Lift up your heads, O mighty gates. Be lifted up, you doors, and let the King of Glory come in. How can you proclaim the King of Glory without opening the doors to let God in? So here's another fascinating fact about the Transfiguration. Jesus was transfigured. His garments became dazzling white, not like this, so dazzling that the disciples were probably almost blinded. Dazzling, amazing. It was so awesome how his countenance and his garments changed by the Transfiguration. I bet they were amazed. But something else was on their mind when they saw that. You see, that was the way the Roman emperors were described when they were taken up to heaven, as being transfigured with garments that were dazzlingly bright. That was the way the ancient Hebrew kings were described, as being transfigured or transformed with garments that were dazzlingly white and bright. So Jesus, at that moment, was being compared to earthly political rulers So when the disciples were there, and that question was probably in their mind, who is this King of glory? And they said, yes, it's not Caesar. It's not Herod. It's not our earthly rulers. It is Jesus, is our King of glory. And what's the effect of that? Opening up your heart to the doors of God's presence. How can you not affirm, for we as Christians, Jesus, God, as King of glory, and not be changed? So that is the question for our lives and for the church. Who is the King of glory? And how will the gates and doors be opened and lifted to let the King of glory in? What gates and doors in your lives need to be opened that the King of glory will come in? What gates and doors of the church need to be opened that the King of glory may come in? I wonder if you get up in the morning, you wake up. Isn't that a gift, just to wake up in the morning and just say, who is the King of glory? Oh God, open my heart that I may be the doorway to your presence in the world. And just give thanks for the expectation and promise and joy that the day presents to you. You're in Stop and Shop or Friends. And you know, sometimes grocery shopping can feel like a burden. And you go to that checkout line, all you want to do, hey, come on, hurry up, hurry up. Well, you know, every person who stands behind a checkout line, and every person who's filling those shelves, restocking those shelves, is a child of God. And there is a light of God within these persons. Go to the checkout line and ask that person about themselves. Give them a smile. Open up the doors of the King of glory to this person. Do so when you're walking on the beach, walking or cycling on the bike path, and take notice of the earth that God created. The earth that God wants you to love with strength and with commitment and passion. When you're sitting at the bedside of a loved one who is struggling, who is the King of glory, the presence of God in that moment, open your hearts, open the doors to allow God's love to come in and touch you as well as your loved one. When you hear news about climate change, or you see plastic floating in the ocean, ask yourself, who is the King of glory? And what would the King of glory want me to do? What actions should I take? When you hear about the news of the opioid crisis here on Cape Cod, ask yourself, who is the King of glory, and what would the King of glory want me to do and want us to do as church? And when you're asked to consider whether or not we should be a safe community to welcome refugees, ask yourself, who is the King of glory? And how does the King of glory want me to open the doors, or want us as church to open the doors and the gates in response to those who have no homes? See, the transfiguration can be a part of your life, For if you ask that question, who is the King of glory, then respond with a sense of awe, or by opening your heart to the gates and doors of God, you will transfigure the world. And that is what we are called to do. It's a beautiful mystery. It requires imagination. But just ask yourself, who is the King of glory? Amen.